Good morning everyone, it's Monday the 22nd of February and I hope you all had a wonderful half term. It's our first writing lesson back, which means it's time to start a new topic. So today we're going to be identifying the features of a legend because, as you may have guessed, our new topic will be to write a legend. So I do now quite similar in some ways but slightly different than what we were doing just before half term. I've given you 3 sentences to correct. Just as a little hint, there may be a couple of sentences within each one. This is just so I can target more specific areas that I am seeing cropping up in submissions on Seesaw. So pause the video here whilst you copy them up and make the necessary corrections. Number 1, I don't know, the dog may have eaten the sausages. Number 2, which museum is your favourite in Liverpool? I've never been there before. And number 3, their new book sold lots of copies. So pause the video here whilst you complete that activity and then press play once you're ready to see how you got on. Okay, well done. So let's see how we did. So we can see that with number 1, I don't know, we need an apostrophe for the word don't. I do not know. I don't know, the dog may have eaten the sausages. Well, here I have the subject, I, and the verb. I do not know. So we had, and it expresses a full idea, so we need actually a full stop here and not a comma. That would be a comma splice, which is grammatically incorrect. Because we have the full stop, we now need a capital letter, T, the. I don't know, full stop. The dog may have eaten the sausages. Well, if we can see here that with the verb eaten, that this is actually a present perfect verb, to eat. Ate or eaten is the present perfect form of that verb. So actually what I need to check for is this of. Of is incorrect. Now when we speak, it sounds like we say of because we speak in a way that makes things slightly faster to say. May of, may have is what we're actually saying. So we don't want to use of, we want to use have. That is present perfect. Sorry, that should be a V. So I check the sentence back now. I don't know, the dog may have eaten the sausages, and then a full stop at the end. So well done if you found those mistakes. Then number 2, which museum is your favourite in Liverpool? I've never been there before. The first thing I wanted you to spot was the spelling of which. We are actually missing an H here, so a capital W, separate from the rest of the word please. I'm not joining mine because it is a little bit harder to see when I'm writing on this tablet. W-H-I-C-H, which museum. Which museum is your favourite? This is the incorrect version of your. We want the your, Y-O-U-R, your favourite in Liverpool. Liverpool is a proper noun, it's the name of a city. Also being a bit cheeky by giving you my class name here. And then we have a capital L. So which museum is your favourite in Liverpool? This is asking a question, so we needed a question mark. I do notice that out of all the punctuation types, the question mark tends to be the one that is forgotten the most, so just be careful if you are asking questions. Which museum is your favourite in Liverpool? Because I had a question mark, I've started a new sentence, but either way, it also needs a capital letter and then an apostrophe. I have. So we've actually got that present perfect again. I have, but the contraction form this time. I've never been. Ooh, another way we might say it differently than how it's actually spelt. Been. I've never been there before. Been there before. Full stop. Okay. Sorry, that looks a bit like an L. Let me just redraw that B. Been. And here, their new book sold lots of copies. Now this is just one sentence, so a full stop goes at the end. Now there, if we look at there, we can see the H-E-R-E, which is here, which means that it's relating to a location. And because I'm talking about a book belonging to people, that is the incorrect version of there. So I want to make sure I change this. I still want a capital T. That was good that we had that. But it's actually this spelling of there, T-H-E-I-R. Their new book sold lots. Oh, I see this error a lot actually with this apostrophe here. Sometimes it's easy to put in apostrophes because we're showing possession, but actually this is just a plural, so we don't need an apostrophe here. So I can just cross that out. We don't want that at all. And copies. So I'm adding the suffix s, copies, which means that I have a spelling rule that I need to apply here. I change the Y to an I and I add ES. Copies. IES at the end. So lots to change there. Hopefully that is clear enough for you. Please pause the video here if you did miss any of those out. It's important that you do make those corrections, and then press play once you're ready to continue with your lesson. So over the next few weeks, as I've explained, we are going to be writing a legend. But take a moment now to have a think. What is a legend? And can you name any? And then a bonus question to think about. This is a tricky one. What makes a legend different to a myth? You tend to hear people talking about them together, myths and legends. So what is it that actually makes them separate and very different from each other? Pause the video here while you take a moment to reflect on that. So legends are stories that are handed down through generations. They are thought to have a historical basis, and many of the legends, if not all of them that we are familiar with now, have deep-rooted historical basis to them. They are often focused on one particular person, and they may contain elements of magic and myth. But the key word there is elements. They are largely more realistic, and if we think of some examples that we know, so Robin Hood, King Arthur, and King Arthur and Merlin, the Knights of the Round Table. So with Merlin you've got a mythological element there, but a lot of it could be realistic, just extraordinary people. And Odysseus from ancient Greece. So these legends, Robin Hood and King Arthur, are British in origin. Obviously Odysseus is ancient Greek. And you can see and hopefully understand that they are incredibly historical. And I've touched on what differentiates them from myths slightly, and there are subtle differences between them, but they are different. So in a myth you typically have gods and goddesses with imaginary creatures. We actually wrote a Viking myth earlier on in the year, hopefully you can remember, and we talked all about the different gods, the different animals they could have travelled on, of a quest that they went on. Whereas in a legend we want someone who is more of an everyday person, maybe an extraordinary person, all the same, and I'll come on to the legend that we're writing. So Robin Hood, he is a man, but an extraordinary man. In a myth, imaginary lands, we were writing about Asgard and Midgard. Well, I suppose Midgard is was the Old Norse version of Earth, but Jotunheim, those imaginary lands in our Viking Norse myths, sometimes based on real places, whereas in a legend, in natural settings that we could actually visit, but that happened a long time ago. In a myth, there aren't always happy endings. Sometimes there are, but if you think back to year 4 when you, or it might have been year 3, with Theseus and the Minotaur, the ending to that is quite tragic. Whereas in a legend, the protagonist, the main character, becomes a hero with a moral or a lesson. There's something to be learned generally. Myths include magic, whereas legends are more realistic and tend not to have magic. Although in some cases there may be a monster. There are some exceptions to this, whereas in a myth there is magic throughout and it's a magical realm or a magical world that you're immersed in. A hero in a legend may have special powers, such as being incredibly strong or an incredible fighter or so on. So hopefully that makes sense to you. There is a difference, it is very subtle, but we are erring on the side of realism in our legend, but they are still incredibly exciting. So our unit is going to be inspired by the Anglo-Saxon legend Beowulf. So luckily we have learned about the Anglo-Saxons earlier on in the year, and we know that they were Scandinavian in origin, and this is where actually the poem is set, because a legend would have been passed down through word of mouth, and that was the the unifying ancestral home with the Anglo-Saxons, which is perhaps why it is based in Scandinavia. But it was written in Old English, and it is thought to be one of the oldest surviving pieces of literature in the English language, and it was written as a poem, really long narrative poem. Obviously we're going to be reading a story version that I've written, and then rewriting our own models inspired by it. So before we actually come to reading the rewritten myth, the rewritten legend, what features do you expect to find in the text? And what genres do you think it will be similar to, and why? So pause the video here while you reflect on that. Okay, so let's dig into the legend. So this is Beowulf. I've put some pictures on just to help you imagine some of the settings. Some are quite tricky to get hold of, so hopefully they make sense with the paragraph. And I will pause at various points and ask you to read out loud. So, before the world became as it is today, Denmark was a wild and untamed land. Marauding robbers roamed the misty moors, and savage beasts lurked in the dark forests. Fortunately, protecting the Danish people from these dangers was a great ruler named Hrothgar. To rejoice his many years of successful reign, he ordered the work of a grand mead hall. It was made of the finest wood and large enough to host enormous parties. He named it Heorot. To celebrate, King Hrothgar arranged an extravagant party and invited his bravest soldiers to a lavish feast. However, across the moor, where the wind howled like an angry wolf, a foul creature had been awakened by the revelry and crawled from its swamp. You read blue and green, please. Pause the video while you read them out loud. The following morning, King Hrothgar was horrified to discover what had happened. "Anyone who can bring me that monster's head will get riches beyond their wildest dreams," the king boomed from inside his castle. You read the red section and pause the video. Press play once you're ready for blue. After boarding his ship with his trusty men, he sailed the frothing ocean from Sweden to Denmark to where King Hrothgar was waiting to welcome him. You read green, then press play for purple. As darkness swallowed the night, Beowulf headed towards the haunted halls of Heorot. From the shadows of the rafters, the fabled hero watched the wretched Grendel slope into view. His steely eyes were locked onto the monster, and he waited for the right moment. Without warning, Beowulf leapt down and onto the back of the beast, armed only with his sword. Grendel, who was rearing up in surprise like a stallion, howled in anger. You read the blue section, press play for green. He then felt a surge of power course through his body. He tugged at the ogre's limbs with all his might and ripped an arm from the monster's body. Grendel's crimson blood sprayed out uncontrollably, and he ran away shrieking into the night. By the next morning, news of Grendel's defeat spread far and wide. The good king arranged a celebratory feast to be held in the hall of the great battle. That evening, huge crowds gathered in Heorot. Inside they danced and drank, ate and laughed. A wave of relief had swept over the people of Denmark. You can finish with the green section now and press play once you're ready to continue. So hopefully you enjoyed reading through that. I know I had lots of fun writing that as well. I think I love narratives like this because you could just really get into setting the atmosphere, make it really suspenseful and exciting. So I'm really looking forward to starting this unit with you. So we've read through the text now, so I've got some quick fire questions. You don't need to write these answers down, although you can do if you want to, but you can just say them out loud or think them in your head. So first question, where is the legend set? Take a moment to think about that, or you can pause the video if you want to. The legend is set in Denmark. Number 2, what caused Grendel was the monster, to attack? The noises from the feast, maybe even the smells from the feast, but obviously they're having this grand celebration, revelry, woke him up and attracted him. Oh, I've forgotten to... Sorry. So, what was Grendel like? I've forgotten to cover this one actually, so giving you terrifying, but what else was Grendel like? Have a think now. Ugly and evil, I added, so not someone you wanted to meet particularly, and maybe cruel as well, the way that he gobbled up those soldiers. Number 4, how did Hrothgar feel after the event? Upset and angry. Rightfully so, his men had just been eaten by this terrible beast and he demanded someone to pursue it, to bring him his head. Number 5, how did Beowulf defeat Grendel? He ripped off his arm. So that's true to the legend. And what sort of person is Beowulf based on the whole narrative? What impression do you get of that character? So I had some ideas here. So brave, determined, strong, fierce. You might have had other adjectives, but I think as long as it's in the tone of that, he's seen as a positive character. I'm quite happy with those suggestions. And then, how does everyone feel after Grendel is defeated? Incredibly happy. They're relieved that the danger has been eliminated. So now we've read through the model, we're going to summarise what each paragraph is about and identify key features that have been used. And this is called creating a toolkit. We're going to use the features we highlight in our shared letter next week. So you can access the printout that is on the home learning page, or you can use a piece of paper. I think paper is probably better, a bit easier, because you can actually answer the questions as we go through the video. I'll have each paragraph up again. So I would recommend that. So on your paper, write the subheading Legend Toolkit now. So this will look very reminiscent of when we did the same lesson for the advice letter when we identified the features. I would strongly encourage you to work from paper and make a note on the paper rather than printing, because that's what I'm going to be doing and showing you how to do it in the video. And it just means that you could pause the video on each paragraph, complete the work, and then press play and continue. I know that some of you do prefer to work from a worksheet, so I have prepared one already. It doesn't match up exactly because it would look quite confusing with the layout. So what you have paragraph 1, which is my model, so you can write these down or skip these 2 steps, and the magpie words are for each paragraph as well, rather than repeating them all. So just ignore that stage for now, that will come later, but you've got all of the paragraphs here if you did want to read them, or for some reason it isn't clear in the video. But I am going to work from the video and I'll show you alternated between the screens. So there's no need to print today, but that is available if you preferred to work from that. So this first paragraph, so I want to summarise it and then I want to find the features. So when we are creating our toolkit like we did with the advice letter, we became really familiar with using contractions and informality in a range of sentences. We want to build up the same knowledge of what skills we need to include. So summarising it first, so I can see from my steps, I've got when the story is set, what the ruler of the kingdom is like, and what change happens there. So I know from the red section, before the world became as it is today, misty moors and dark forests, so I'm establishing my setting. And then I'm also introducing one of the main characters. I know there's a king there, and I know that there's a change. He builds this whole Heorot. So when I come to summarise my paragraph, I can use what I've read in order to do that. So if I flip to my notepad, I'm just going to write paragraph 1. And remember, this one's mine, so you don't have to do this one. Paragraph 1, I know that A is the summary, so I know it's the introduction and establishing the setting. And it's really important that the setting is established at the beginning of a story so we can fully envision where the story is taking place, what sort of characters, what sort of world, how long ago it is, so we can just better understand what the author is creating. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to skip a line for B, and if I go back to my my paragraph, I know that B are the features, so I can see that I have before the world became as is today. Well, this is a subordinate clause. Wild and untamed land, so I'm using figurative language to describe my setting. Really important, really powerful when it's done well. Oh, sorry, I've just realised that I'm not actually showing you. So I've got my figurative language. If I go back to my paragraph, I can see that marauding robbers roamed the misty moors and savage beasts lurked in the dark forest. So I've got a different type of sentence. I have a compound sentence Really important for variety. We don't just want lots of complex sentences. I've used a bit of alliteration there as well. I think I use alliteration a bit later on from what I remember, which works really well. If I go back to my paragraph, fortunately, so I've got a fronted adverbial here. So many features, and I'm only just into my second step. Fortune protected the Danish people from these dangers was a great ruler named Hrothgar. And I can see here that if I highlight it, hopefully I could do this straight enough. I think it might be a bit big, make it a bit thinner. This part that I'm going really wobbly with here is a example of commas or parenthesis. And remember, when there aren't too many examples in this, I think they're more in the beginning, that maybe it would be too informal with brackets, and it's an example of giving additional information. So I have a parenthesis here with commas. Oh, there we go. Commas for parenthesis, commas for parenthesis. I would also recommend as well that you do handwrite these, because you might find that you run out of room on your sheet, especially if there are lots of things to find. To rejoice his many years of successful reign, he ordered the work of a grand mead hall. So again, to rejoice, we've got another fronted adverbial, subordinate clause. I don't need to add that back in. It was made of the finest wood and large enough to host enormous parties. He named it Heorot. So then I've got and a short sentence. And a short sentence for emphasis. And that's my toolkit just for one paragraph. Now, I'm expecting that a few of these will feature throughout. I might not have too many commas or parentheses, because again, if we have too many, it gets too clunky and convoluted. Figurative language will only feature, I expect, in parts of the story where there is an important character or an important setting change. So let's take a look at paragraph 2. So this is one that we're going to do together. So what I'd like you to do now is to pause the video here and have a read through the paragraph again and work out how you would summarise that really short, and then what features you can see, and then press play, and then we'll go through it together and see how we did. So pause the video here whilst you complete paragraph 2, and then we will check that one through together. So these are the features I found for paragraph 2. I wrote that the summary was the monster attacks and the ruler reacts. Found fronted adverbials for cohesion, adjectives, subordinated conjunctions, parenthesis, simile, compound sentence. You can see a real mixture in sentence types here. Adjectives for openers, that greedy and ghastly part, which I found quite interesting. I might magpie that later. Deliberate repetition, alliteration as well, which I think is a really important feature. Alliteration is engaging to the reader, and because these legends were historically told orally, I think that's a really important feature to try and retain when possible. Obviously don't overdo it, but I think elements of it are really nice. Short sentence, subordinate clause, possessive apostrophe, which lends itself well to restructuring a sentence at the order, and obviously then speech. So it'd be interesting to see if we found the same features or not, but they are the features I identify for paragraph 2. So over to you now. You're going to complete paragraph 3, 4 and 5 of the summaries and the features. So we will go over these later on in the lesson with the answers, so please stay tuned for those. But I want you to summarise the paragraph, then find its features. So pause the video here for paragraph 3. And then pause the video for paragraph 4, summarise it, then find its features. And then for paragraph 5, summarise the paragraph and then find its features. So now we're looking to magpie words from the model, and this is a really important stage of identifying features, because part of the features of that is also the language of that genre. And just as we worked really hard to establish that conversational and chatty and friendly tone in an advice letter, we really want to make sure we're capturing the right tone for a legend. And if we interact with the text and take what we can from it, it means that you're more likely to internalize the sentence structures and the language choices that you can then use in your independent work, or even build upon, again, as a springboard to develop your own ideas. It's a way into the genre in order by doing this. So I would also recommend doing this with books that you read for pleasure as well. If you see a really fantastic description that really captures really effectively the mood or the setting or the tone, or a description of some kind, make a note of it. You can write it down. You could have a little journal that you keep amazing examples of writing in, and then you can then draw from that when you come to writing your own narratives for your own work. So you may not have read many legends so far, but if you are familiar with myths, quite similar language style really, with a myth obviously. A myth, it tends to have more magic and gods and goddesses and so on. So anyway, when we come to Magpie Words, we want to look for phrases that would engage the reader. So I know I talked about alliteration earlier. I think that one would, examples of that would be quite effective, that establish the setting. Again, a legend is historical, so anything that captures the sense of the history, or a different location, or the moodiness of it as well. And again, the mood of the story and the genre. So I've tried to write this model in a way that it is a little bit old-fashioned. It is quite complex in its sentence structures, not overly simplistic, because we want to get that atmosphere across. Anything that adds suspense and drama, because obviously we have a monster that's attacking a village and a brave hero that comes to save the day. There will be sentences that work towards that, and then any opportunities for cohesion. So you might want to jot down any ideas for openers, or any other ways that cohesion has been added. So we have our paragraph 1 again. So on your worksheet, I know that this will look like, you just go back to part C now, under the paragraph. So again, this is one that I'm going to go over. You don't have to do this one. You can if you want to, but then all the other paragraphs have a Magpie Words section for you to complete. But I'm going to use my notepad for that. So if I just go back to my screen, so I can see the opener here. So again, even from the first opener, trying to establish that setting of it being a bit mysterious, it being just the right tone, the right voice for it really. So I think I quite like that opener, and we can think really carefully about that next week. We've got descriptions like wild and untamed. They're quite nice. Marauding robbers, misty moors. So we've got some alliteration, so I might want to make a note of that as well. Fortunately, that's not too exciting, so I don't think I want to make a note of that. To rejoice is many years, so maybe rejoice is a word I want to use in mine. Finest wood, large enough, nothing too exciting there. So I know that before the world became as it is today, so what I'm going to do is go back to my page, and if I put paragraph 1, Magpie Words, and I might use little bullet points for this one. So before the world became, let me just check the phrasing on that one again, I've forgotten already. Became as it is today. So without even explicitly stating this happened 1,000 years ago, I've tried to evoke that through the description. Became this today, and remembering the comma, quite helpful. Then underneath, another bullet point. If I go back, what else did I like? I liked wild and untamed. Now, hopefully you don't use the explicit same vocabulary in the same sentences as I've used in mine for your innovative, but you might want to use this a bit later on, or find synonyms for this and transform it. If I go back, I quite liked rejoice. Oh, and misty moors I liked as well. So you actually might want to just save paper and go on the same line. So I might put Misty Moores here. But I know with the bullet point I separated it, and it was rejoice, wasn't it? So I'm quite happy with my choice of vocabulary there. Yep. So let's have a look at paragraph 2, a much longer one here. So you could pause the video and take a look, and then we'll go through together what I would have chosen. Obviously, there's no right or wrong answer for this really, but I would recommend that you're finding, I would say, about 4 pieces for each paragraph, just to show that you have considered it carefully. So pause the video here and then take a look over this paragraph, and then we'll see what we've come up with. For my magpie words for paragraph 2, I chose 4, so I had to celebrate, which I thought was good for cohesion, whilst not the most exciting, can easily be adapted. I took a segment of a sentence here, across the moor were there, so it's part of a relative clause. So again, I like the structure of it, so I could easily recycle that and then add in my own details. Greedy and ghastly, huge and hideous for alliteration, and also I liked that I had adjectives as an opener for a change of pace, and the phrase unholy stench. So you might have chosen some of the ones. It'd be interesting to see if you had some of the same choices, or you might have chosen different ones from that paragraph. And paragraph 3, you can pause the video here whilst you read over paragraph 3 and make a note, or obviously you can refer to the home learning sheet, but pause the video here once you make those whilst you make those magpie word choices. And paragraph 4, and paragraph 5. Here are the answers for the toolkit from earlier on of a lesson for paragraph 3, 4 and 5. So please check over your work here and make any necessary corrections. You may want to pause the video. And then finally, our plenary. So just to take a moment to reflect on this really, what details do you think would make an interesting legend? And what compositional and grammatical features do you think are the most important ones to make sure we include when we come to write our own? So hopefully you're feeling really excited to start this new unit. I know that I am as well. So have a great day everyone, and I'll be catching up with you tomorrow to continue on with our learning. Have a great day. Bye.